There it is. Hello everyone and welcome to the channel here. It is springtime and please excuse the wind. It is very much springtime here in Kansas. But it is springtime, and so this is now the best time, I think, to bring the Grazer Mower review to the internet. So if you see one of these, maybe you're on the Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or wherever you do your shopping, maybe even an auction, and you see one of these old Grazers, you might be wondering, well, is it really worth trying to get? Because in theory, you could get them for a few $100s, and they're a larger mower, more horsepower, more cutting width, more cutting capability. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, that could be a bargain, but I've never heard of a Grazer before. So the purpose of this video is for me to share with you what I know about Grazer, my experience with this one, and we've got another one over there that's going to need some love before too long. But this is the one that's been running, so I'm going to share with you what I know about it, what I think about it, and hopefully that'll help you to make a decision if you see one of these and you're considering getting one. So again, please excuse the wind and let's get into it. I'd like to begin with a short history of Grazer, and I do mean short because there's not really a lot of information out there on them, just so you know kind of what they are, where they come from. What I've been able to understand from the internet, which is not much, is that Grazer for a short while was its own company, and then it was acquired by Ingersoll Equipment, okay? Now, Ingersoll Equipment is derived, believe it or not, from J.I. Case. When J.I. Case and International Harvester merged back in the 80s, Case sold off its lawn and garden line to one of the higher-ups in the Case company, Jack Ingersoll. Not related to Ingersoll Rand, by the way. But Jack Ingersoll acquired the Case lawn and garden line, and he continued to manufacture the Colt lawn tractors, his own Ingersoll lawn tractors, and then later Grazer zero-turn mowers. There are also Ingersoll mowers of the same style. They are just painted orange, but they're the same thing. And for a while, Ingersoll Equipment manufactured just mowers and lawn tractors and things like that. I do not understand exactly what happened to Mr. Ingersoll, but his company was acquired by Eastman Industries of, I believe, Portland, Maine. And the company was supposed to be moved from Wisconsin to Maine, which that was started, and some machines were produced at the Maine factory. But this was in the early 2000s, and I think by the time they started to get going, 2008 hit, and we're all old enough to remember in whole or in part 2008, and Eastman Ingersoll did not do very well through that. So for all intents and purposes, the company that makes Grazer is defunct, which, go figure. So I wish I had more information on them, but it's not like people sell, the big book of defunct lawnmower companies. So that's what little I've been able to glean off of the internet. So if you're looking for parts and stuff, there's one resource left for official Case-Ingersoll Parts, and that is going to be Case-Ingersollparts.com. Or, yeah, I think that's the name of it. I'll put everything in the description that I mentioned in this video, the places I got parts and stuff like that. But that's all the information I really know about the Grazer company. Okay, so I'm going to start this actual review part of telling you what I don't like about this mower and the problems I've had with it, which is a little bit different than how most people do stuff, but I want to start with that. So a little bit of information about this thing, kind of the specs on it. This is a 22 horsepower, 52-inch front cut, zero-turn mower, okay? Now, this particular model is a 2297K, which means the engine is a Kohler Command. I am not sure what the difference between the 97 series and the 90 series is, which is what's over there. That one is a 2090V, and the Vs are Briggs & Stratton Vanguards. Now, I'm not 100% on the 90 series, but at least on these 97 series, there is an 18, a 20, and a 22. So 18, 20, and 22 horsepower, respectively. This is the largest of its type in its category. if you will, for Grazer mowers. And like I said, there should be a similar Ingersoll brand, but I'm not 100% on the numbers for those, because any information about these comes from the internet, and because this company went out of business so long ago, the internet didn't really document it all that well. So let's talk about what I don't like about it and move on from there. Okay, as with any machine, there are some problems that are just inherent to the design, and there are also a lot of problems that are inherent to the last guy to work on it and what he did. So the biggest problem I've had with this mower is the belts, okay? Oddly enough, not the deck belt, okay, but the arm belt and particularly the transmission drive belt. I have put 5 of each on, okay, last season, because I ran this thing all through 2023, and a couple of the transmission belts were the wrong size. That was my fault. Several of the arm belts were the wrong size. That was my fault. When I got them straightened out to the right size, I'll get you in here so you can see. So your arm belt goes back to your PTO clutch there, okay? And then your transmission belt runs from your engine flywheel to a cross shaft that powers both of your hydrostatic drives, okay? Now, once I got this belt up here straightened out, it lasted a lot longer, but they still go out about every 8 to 10 operating hours. And I don't exactly know how close I am to losing these belts again, because the hour meter stopped working this year for some reason. I need to fix that, but I'm pretty sure all 3 of these belts at this point are on their way out the door. Any day now they will go. And while the belts are not the most expensive thing to replace, they are a pain in the ass, okay? But that's the biggest problem I've had, is this belt and that transmission belt. The deck belt have actually had 0 problems with, really. And then, other than that, it's just little stuff that I've had issues with. I have had problems with it not wanting to start, which I think is related to some electrical problems. The PTO switch I replaced, because originally it was a safety switch. I replaced it with just a straight on-off toggle switch, okay? I did a lot of custom wiring on this to make things work, because a lot of the safety switches were not working correctly. And so when I first got this going last year, you know, like I would take it out of the shift interlock and I'd go to drive with it and it would die. If I had the deck running but the interlock in, it would die. It was weird stuff like that. And I'm not a big believer in safety switches, just because I know what this mower is like. I know what it's going to do. I'm not going to stick my hand under the deck while it's running. And sometimes you need to be able to get off the mower and see what the hell's going on while stuff is moving, okay? And you can't do that with safety switches. So I simplified the electrical, but there's still some electrical issues. I blew quite a few fuses before I figured out there were some grounding problems. I still have more grounding problems I need to fix. But I think it's mainly in this switch here. You have to get this thing just right for it to crank correctly. Those are really the only problems I've had with this, is just those 2 belts and some miscellaneous electrical. Other than that, it's really run fine. So even though I had some major and minor problems with this, we're not done talking about issues just yet, because there are a few things about this I just flat do not like. Service is not the easiest, okay? Changing these 2 belts sucks. It absolutely sucks. Dealing with anything where the deck has to come off or you have to mess with this belt, you got to remove this crossbar, okay? And removing that crossbar is actually pretty easy. You just pull one of these cotter pins on either side, and you drive that pin in, and the bar slams up with all the force of nature, okay? But then getting it back on is a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. I don't know that they could have made it much easier. It wouldn't be so bad if I didn't have to replace this every 10 hours, machine hours, but that's the way it is. Now, as you can see, draining the oil is pretty easy. They put the drain spout right there. You know, to get into the machine itself, see if I can open the seat lid one-handed here real quick. I mean, I said one-handed. There's really no way to do that. So The oil filter is, it's back there. Well, maybe you can't see it from this side. It's back in there. You can, yeah, it's right down. It's right down here. You may not be able to see it. You can barely see it past that hose. So if the mower is cool, yeah, you can kind of reach in there and get it off and put it back on. You know, your fuel filter's right there. It's not the worst thing to get to. Changing the spark plugs, if you had to do that, it's kind of a pain. Serviceability is not the best. In my opinion, this is easier to deal with for the same things than a regular lawn tractor, especially with drive belts and deck belts and stuff like that. It's a lot easier to deal with in that regard than a lawn tractor. Oil filters are pretty easy to change on a lawn tractor, same with fuel filters. It's not bad for what it is, but it's still not fun. The seat lid is kind of a pain in the butt. They've got that static notched piece of steel that holds this whole thing up. I wish they had put some lift cylinders in it, like you have on a car hood. That would have made it a lot better. Their latch and stuff, a lot of this is just very simple formed steel, which is nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it does make it a little less smooth when you go to work on things. You know what I mean? But access, while not the greatest, is still not the worst. The battery is easy to get to. The fuel tank is easy to get to. Now, I think I should be able to close this one-handed. Okay. Nope. Gotta get it past that second notch. The fuel tank and the battery, of course, are not hard to get to. And you can, of course, fuel it from here. You don't have to raise that lid. It's just, and you're not going to have to change the filters very often. It's just when you do, it is a little awkward. And it's, you know, I have to critique it for that. I would also like to note the placement of the muffler. And this might seem like a really petty thing, okay? The only reason the muffler becomes a major issue is if it's not very windy outside and all that heat from the muffler just radiates up and it starts to cook the backside of your leg. It's not the worst thing ever, but it does get kind of toasty if you're not careful. So it's good to have some breeze to help blow that heat away. I feel like they could have routed it slightly better or maybe insulated that better. And I might see about putting some heat shielding on there, some better heat shielding to kind of force that heat down and out the back. Because, you know, yeah, if there's no wind and it's really hot outside, the heat from that muffler will radiate up and it'll start to make your leg hot. All right, we're getting to the good stuff, I promise. But I did a whole video series last year about putting this thing back together. I probably should have mentioned that at the start of the video. So if you want to see the specifics of what I did, there's a whole playlist on my channel, Grazer Mower. Okay, you can go and scroll through those and check them out if you want. They're not really my best productions, but it's better than nothing, which is what was on the internet before, which was just big flat nothing. So let's talk about cost here real quick. If I figured right, hang on, let me switch hands here so I can get my paper. This is the downside to it being windy when I want to come outside. Okay, so this was just about $1,200 to get going again. And a little bit of context for this. It was purchased at I think about 2009 or 10, if I remember. And the first thing that happened to it, it just put it out of commission for a while. There were a lot of factors that went into why it was not fixed. But what broke on it was the clutch, okay? The PTO clutch back here, which some of you might say, well, isn't that a problem you should have mentioned? No, because this clutch fixes what the factory clutch had a problem with. Right here, okay, this is a quick disconnect. It's just a wire connector. So if something happens and you shear that wire off, you just unplug the connector and get a new one and plug it in, and you don't have to pull the clutch off or anything, because to get the clutch off of this, you have to pull the body off, get the motor out. It's a pain, okay? And I know that because I did it. I actually had to do it twice. But the original, which is a Warner mag stop, the problem is the wires just were hardwired into the clutch itself. okay? So if you sheared those wires off, you either had to splice them back on or solder them back on or something. But in the case of this thing, what happened was they broke off right where they went into the clutch. There was no purchase on those wires to solder or splice anything back together. And so this thing sat because I was a little kid then. Dad did not have time. He had other stuff to do, you know, and so it sat. Now, last year, we finally got around to getting to this, mainly because we had to. The John Deere lawn tractor quit, and I got tired of driving it. So I got this thing out, got it apart, fixed it and all that. But it was quite a job, okay? It was quite a job, and there was a lot of things involved with getting that done. So the reason I mention all that is because this thing sat for so long, there were a lot of things that had to be done to it that if it had not sat for so long, it probably would not have needed. So, let's see. Let's go through the big ticket items. I did a service on it, so I replaced the oil filter, the air filter, the spark plugs, all that good stuff. Starter solenoid, of course, that was all fixed. So what was done to this, in essence, was a PTO clutch, which was $160, a lot cheaper than the Warner one. That was $240. And these clutches are everywhere, okay? I mean, they're pretty common, which is awesome. It needed a starter, which I was not expecting. That was $180. Then, of course, the filters. The deck, because it had sat for so long and got water in it, it rusted out. Now, we are farmers, so we have plenty of scrap iron laying around. Dad welded the deck up, and I got the spindle housings. We had to fix one of the spindle housings. I got new bearings and put in them. New pulleys on the whole deck. I was able to reuse the deck drive belt. So I don't know how many hours that deck drive belt has on it, but it's got at least 40 or 50 because I used it all last year with no problems. Had to replace a tension spring, stuff like that. So on the deck, spindle bearings, spindle pulleys, a gearbox output pulley, which is underneath the deck, tension spring, deck idlers. You know, that was quite a bit of money, but about $250 for all of that. And these were some really nice spindle pulleys from McMaster-Carr. They were cast iron. They were a little pricey, but they're very, very durable. The ones that came on this were a steel, so the cast iron ones should last a lot longer. Now, the electrical, the most expensive thing on the electrical was it needed a battery. Of course, when something sits for that long, it's going to need a battery, okay? That was not too bad. Got a decent battery from O'Reilly for $65. Then I also replaced, like I said, I replaced the PTO switch and the starter solenoid, so there was that. There was also a circuit breaker. That was part of the reason the original clutch had some problems. I think those wires got hot because whoever had this before us, we did buy it used, whoever had it before us deleted the circuit breaker. And that was one of the first things I fixed, and that actually solved quite a few problems. So then belts. The transmission belt is an A by 32, which is a 1/2 inch belt by 32 inches, okay? That's the correct size. Now the arm belt, I started out putting a B by 55, which is like a 21/32 belt by 55 inches. It needs to be 56 inches. Good grief. It needs to be the 56-inch belt on the arm there. And so, like I said, I had to replace several of those, 5 each, and that was not cheap. So let me switch pages here real quick. I know my handwriting's awful. Okay, so pretty much every pulley on this had to be replaced. So the transmission tensioner pulley was replaced. There was miscellaneous hardware, so, you know, all the little bolts like here that hold that on. These were free. We had them on hand, but a lot of hardware, $60 in hardware, which is not bad because I put a lot of hardware on this. Grease points, you know, new grease fittings, inner tubes. These are the original tires, put tubes in them, and I screwed up a couple of tubes, so that was a little bit of extra expense, but the tubes were not bad, and every tire got them, and they held air phenomenally. I mean, they didn't really deflate much at all over the winter, which is awesome. And let's see, what else? Okay, so I did paint this a little bit because I had free paint, and I painted this angle iron right here, and you can tell it actually looks pretty similar. It's faded in and stuff. I wanted to protect the underside of the deck a little bit, which is why it's white. I just used kind of what I had on hand. And I thought, well, if it shears off inside of a year, so be it. But it actually is holding up pretty good. So welding the deck didn't really cost anything because we already had the welding rod and stuff here, okay? The deck belt was reusable, which was a big expense saved because those are not cheap. It's a 122 3/4 inch belt. It's a long damn belt. And the blades, oddly enough, were reusable. And even though I had to resharpen them 3 times last year, they still cut pretty good. And they have been abused. So yeah, just under $1,200 approximately to get all the stuff and get this thing back going again. And now if you cross that, or if you compare that to getting a mower of similar horsepower, of similar cutting width, you're going to spend more than $1,200, depending on what brand you get and where you go, right? But to me, that was a bargain. So even with the original purchase price of this, adjusted for inflation, plus what I put into it in parts, we're still money ahead on this thing, and it has paid its dues. Okay, and I'll kind of explain why in the next segment here. Okay, so what do I like about this mower? Well, there's actually quite a bit. The biggest thing I like about this, and I'll tie into this in the next segment, the biggest thing I like about this is that it is built with very standard size parts, you know, for the most part, which makes it easy to fix and adapt because you can't just go to the company that made it and order stuff anymore. So it's easy to adapt common things. If you're willing to do a little fabricating, you can make this work if stuff's kind of worn out on it, okay? So it's pretty easy to do that. I like that, okay? I like being able to fix stuff, and this is pretty easy to work with in terms of fixing it. This is steel, okay? Good old steel, and it's heavy. I think in the manual it said this is 600 pounds as it sits. So if you add the operator, and I'm 235, so you're looking at 8, maybe 900 pounds depending. That's a heavy damn machine, and it moves and mows just fine. Now, I'll stand back a little bit so that and the seat is completely shot if you didn't realize that, which is why the towel and the feed bag are there. But the design of this, with the tail wheel, the single tail wheel, and the front cut, I really, really like this. I have run some zero turn with the deck underneath slightly to the front, you know, like most zero turns do, and they will beat your ass to death. I mean, they really will. This thing, not near as bad. It's still bouncy, okay? There's little holes and stuff all over the yard. No yard's going to be smooth around here, but this thing handles bumps a lot better than one of those others. I can tell you that with confidence. I like that you sit up higher. I really like that. To me, the controls are easy to operate because I can just rest my arms right on my knees and just gently run the steering levers. It's very nice. The steering on this is super, super smooth and very responsive. Even though it sat for so long without being run, it is just incredibly responsive. It's an amazing hydrostat system they have on this. I'm very impressed with it. I like the electronic clutch, you know, it's just like on an AC compressor. You put power to it, it engages the clutch and turns everything, and it works very well. I haven't had a bit of problem with it, other than the bolt that attaches it to the crankshaft wanting to come out, but I put a little bit longer bolt in and put some Loctite on it, and I haven't had a problem since. But it runs and drives really well. The Kohler Command is an outstanding engine. It cuts very, very well, even though I have cut everything from, June grass to Johnson grass to mare's tail and fireweeds and wood and the occasional chunk of metal and Bermuda grass. And last year it rained a lot, so most of what I cut was at least a foot tall, and this thing just ate it up. No problem. I mean, I wasn't whizzing through it, but if I went slow, single pass, it just cut wonderfully. I can't understate how well this thing cuts. I'm still very surprised. The fuel economy on this is such that I can cut 3 times as much area on roughly the same fuel that I would have spent just cutting what I used to with the John Deere lawn tractor, okay? So this thing is a 5-gallon tank. I can mow everything over here. There's 2 properties I have to mow. They're not very far apart. There's here at home, and then there's here at the other place, okay? Because the property's split up into 2 places. And I can mow the yard here, around the shop, around the corral, everything like that, on about 2 gallons of fuel. It's insanely efficient. It really is. And then I can go mow the other place on around the same, if I don't let the grass get ahead of me. Of course, if it goes up to like a foot tall and I'm creeping, it takes longer. But compared to the John Deere LT160 that I used to run, I mean, this thing enables me to mow a lot more. I can mow it faster. I can mow 2 places, which is roughly 3 times the area, in the same time on the same fuel, okay, that I used to spend on that John Deere just doing this place. Amazing. It's like, what did I figure? It's like a 200% increase in efficiency. It's insane. And of course, most people would say, well, duh, the zero turn's going to be better than the lawn tractor. Well, you know, I'm impressed, okay? It runs very well. And like I said, just not many problems with it. So the balance, and I'll show you here. Now, this is something else I'm not particularly fond of. They did come with an electric lift option, but you have to use your man hands sometimes. So this thing is so well balanced, okay? I can come here. Well, okay, I may have to use more than one finger, but with not a lot of effort, okay, I can move this thing. Now you might say, okay, well, isn't that a problem when you're transporting and the deck is up and you're going down a hill? Yes, it is. So I wouldn't recommend, you know, rocketing down a hill, but you can't fall forward that much because, you know, it'll catch you, right? Like so. So it's not all bad. They balanced it well. I like the single tail wheel. I wouldn't be against a dual tail wheel. Some models have those, but the single is actually fine. It's a little irritating when I go to load it in the trailer because I have to make a special adjustment to the lawnmower ramps. But, you know, it works fine. What else do I like about this? I had to check my list to make sure I was covering all my points. So, the final thing that I can think of that I really like about this is that there are not a lot of adjustments on it, okay? And I mean normal adjustments you have to make because of regular wear or something like that. It's all self-adjusting. It's all self-regulating. You don't have to get in here and adjust the clutch, which on, and I don't know if you'll be able to get in here and see or not, but on this one here, this 2090, you have to, yeah, you can't see the clutch very well back in there, but it is a little bit different than the one we have. So with this one, if you get poor engagement, you have to go in there and actually adjust the clutch in or out so that it stays tight when it is engaged. It's still electronic engagement, but you have to change it around to where, or you have to adjust it occasionally to where it will stay tight when you are mowing. And yes, this is a bigger deck, just in case anyone noticed that. But see, on this one, you don't have to do that. And, you know, servicing this, the basic stuff that you're going to have to get to, which are pretty much your blades, okay? That's what you're going to be dealing with the most often. They're easy to get to. You, well, I mean, they're not like the most easy thing in the world, right? So basically what you do is you pull these adjustment pins out, and yes, there are several adjustment levels on this deck, which I also really like. It's very handy. It's a little bit of a process to raise it up and down, but most stuff that you want to cut, even if it's heavier, it will cut at one level. You may just have to slow down a bit. So you don't always have to come in here and constantly adjust it up and down to cut denser stuff unless you want to leave it, you know, a higher cut. But to get the blades changed, the easiest way I found to do it is to pull these pins with the deck up in the air. And then what you can do is you can actually pick up on this. It helps if you have two people, but you can kind of pick up on this and flip it, not so it's straight up in the air at like 90 degrees, but at least I would say 45. And you can put a prop under the center here, jack stand or something, and that makes it a lot easier to get under there and undo the blades. And undoing the blades is not bad. They're just 2 3/8 bolts that hold them in a blade saddle, and you can drop them and change them. Not too bad, really. It doesn't take a lot to hold them. I am a big fan of that style. I do not like the single bolt that holds the blade in through faith. I hate that. That's one of the reasons I don't like lawn tractors, is because they all do that, and I hate it. So all of that stuff I really do enjoy about this thing, and it may not seem like a lot to some of you, but to me that's a big deal, and I think it merits a lot of consideration when you're looking at getting one of these Grazers. Okay, before we move on to the wrap up, I want to touch a little bit on parts. So, as I mentioned, the company that makes these is no longer a business. There's one website left where you can get official Case-Ingersoll parts. Most of the parts you get for this 2297 you can get elsewhere, okay? I've already done the research. The videos that I've done on fixing this thing, I put all of the relevant part numbers and where to get them and stuff in the descriptions of those videos. So when I was working on the deck, I put all the links down below for the spindle bearings and the pulleys and all that stuff in that video. So if you're looking for something specific, go check out one of those videos and you can just look at the description and that stuff should be there. There were several places I got parts. The biggest ones were Jack Small Engines and McMaster Car. A lot of the there's one other. No, I guess the biggest one would just be Jack's Small Engines. They were a phenomenal help in cross-referencing stuff and getting dimensions just right, you know, or finding out what the exact dimensions were so I knew what pulleys to order and things like that. They were the biggest help. They had everything I needed, more or less. It's just some of their stuff was a little higher price than I wanted to pay, so I went to some other places to get things a little bit cheaper, and even with shipping, it was worth it. So the spindle pulleys came from McMaster Car. The spindle bearings came from Carnell Sales, big bearing store. Absolute best place to get bearings, just because if you're getting throwaway bearings, that's the best place to do it. That's where we get all the bearings for our disc, and it's where we get all our wheel bearings for like ag implements and stuff like that, is Carnell Sales. So they supplied the spindle bearings. McMaster Car is where I got the spindle pulleys and the gearbox output pulley. A lot of the idler pulleys came from Jack Small Engines. The filters came from Jack Small Engines, just because, you know, O'Reilly had the spark plugs for the Kohler Command. They had a battery. The inner tubes, you can get them from Grazer. They're not super expensive. I ordered a couple from there. You know, the starter came from Walmart, if you can believe it, just because they had the best shipping. And the blades and stuff, well, we'll talk about the blades in a second, but those are like some of the big places that I got a lot of this. The PTO clutch also came from Walmart, and it's the same price as Amazon. So, you know, you can find this stuff around, and, you know, if you don't want to buy the parts that I've listed in those videos from the merchants I reference, you can at least take those part numbers and dimensions and go somewhere else and get them where you prefer, right? And I like that about this, that you can adapt that type of stuff, because no offense to Case-Ingersoll Parts, but some of the things that they had on there, they wanted a pretty penny for, and I made something work that was a lot cheaper. Okay, so the blades are actually a little bit special on this, and I've been doing some research on them. They are an 18-inch long blade, 2.5 inches wide. You can find those around, okay? The problem is, it's a center hole with 2 mounting holes, and they have to be just the right distance apart. So the only place I can find those is Case-Ingersoll Parts. They're the only ones that I can find new blades. There's an Oregon part number, 91277. That's the Oregon number, but they don't make them anymore. Okay? So what I'm going to do, this will be a dedicated video. What I'm planning on doing is I'll get a set of blades from Case-Ingersoll because I know they're the right blades for this deck. And then I will take the old blades, I'll order some aftermarket blades that are the right length and the right width, and they have a center hole started, and I'll go on a drill press and I'll drill the holes that I need to mount them properly to this deck, and then I'll put them on and see if they're going to work. And if they work, then, you know, a little bit of fabricating, you can get new blades and you don't have to worry about running out of available blades, right? Because it takes 3 of them. So, you know, the blades was not able to find. Thankfully, these were usable. They're pretty good blades. I don't know who made these originally, but they're pretty damn good. So I'll see about getting those fixed later. You know, anything more advanced part-wise, like hydrostat, gearbox, I'm not 100% sure where to find parts for that stuff because, well, it's not bad, so I didn't have to look into any of that. I don't know if these hydrostats were a Grazer design or Ingersoll design, not sure. The engine, of course, is a Kohler, so you can go several places to get one of those. It's just a CH22. And Jack Small Engines actually has most of the parts for that Kohler command. So all of that is a good deal. And that's what I meant earlier when I said that this was kind of a hillbilly fix friendly, because you can fabricate stuff. You can find aftermarket parts that are close enough, if not exact. One of the things I actually did on this pulley right here was I took an old stripped out socket, I drilled it out the rest of the way and used it as a bushing to take up slack, because this thing was wanting to flop around and it was tearing up my belts, and it's worked really, really well. So no complaints there. This one here fit exactly as I wanted it to. Oddly enough, that idler pulley back in there, you can see it right there for the transmission belt, that came from Tractor Supply, if you can believe it. So, you know, you just got to kind of look around a little bit. But if you're willing to put in the work, and I've already done a lot of it for you, to be honest, if you're willing to put in the work to look around for these parts, you can find them and put this back together for not too terrible much. All right, well, the wind's really starting to pick up, so let's wrap this video up and be done with it, right? So, would I recommend a Grazer mower, either this particular model or a similar model? Would I recommend one of these to someone? Yes, I would. I would. The question you need to ask yourself, quite honestly, is whether or not you have the time, the patience, the money, the space, and the tools to fix this, because it's likely going to be a project. If you get one of these, there's likely going to be some things that are wrong with it, because parts are not easily available. You have to work for it now, okay? And the people that would have had it, I'm just guessing here, okay? They would have said, well, that's starting to go out. Let's just get rid of it and get something newer, okay? And because I don't want to mess with trying to find the parts, and I understand that. But then you get it, and this stuff seems okay, but it's on its way out the door because it wasn't replaced when it should have been. You know what I mean? Just kind of a general sentiment there. The question is never going to be whether or not this thing will cut well. It will cut well, I promise. If everything's straightened out on this and it's running right, it'll cut phenomenally. And it'll cut damn near anything except rocks and T-posts. But it will fling rocks, I promise you that. You know, it may not cut small trees either, but it'll cut pretty much anything you want within reason. And it runs good, it's fuel efficient, all these good things. But it's going to be a project. So if you've got time and space and tools to mess with one, absolutely get one of these. Whether or not it's going to cut good is not a concern. It will cut good. But if you are the type of person, if you're in a situation where you're like, I need my lawn mowed like right now, and I don't have the time or the money or the patience to mess with one of these, then no, stay away from them. They're good mowers, but you're going to have to work on them. They're old and they're special. And if you don't want to cater to that, that's okay. I understand that. Just don't get one of these and be surprised when it has some issues. But in my opinion, it is very much worth investing your time and money into. And it can be a good machine for you if you pick it up for not much. Now, someone might watch this and ask, okay, well, what's a fair price for one of these Grazers? I wouldn't pay, depending on what the condition is of it, depending on a lot of other things, I would not pay, personally. Let's say it's in decent shape. Let's say the mower you get is in similar shape to this one right here as it sits. I would not pay more than $1,500 for it. That's just me, okay? Because you're looking at, in this case, there's a lot of stuff that's been done to it and it's in fairly good shape right now. But depending on what you get, there's some other stuff that you're like, well, it seems like it's in good shape, but it may not be. So I wouldn't pay more than $1,500 because generally the owner will be happy with that price. If that's your maximum, if you offer someone $1,500 for one of these, they'll be tickled because they'll be like, well, okay, that's probably a lot more than it's honestly worth. I don't have to haul it to the scrapyard and I'm rid of it. And you get something for, yeah, it's a little expensive, but if you have to put a bunch of money into it, even if you have to rebuild the engine, you're still money ahead compared to buying a new mower of the same horsepower and similar cutting width. That is my opinion and estimation. I mean, you can disagree if you want. That's just my advice if you're curious. Well, Owen, what would you pay for one of these? If it was like this, I would pay no more than $1,500 for it. That doesn't mean I'm going to start at $1,500. You know, don't offer them your limit right out of the gate. You know, try and haggle with them a bit, but that's my opinion on this. I would get one if I were you and you had time and space to mess with one. You know, get one, mess with it, fix it up, make it run, and it'll run good for you for a long time if you take care of it. But if you don't have time for a project, I understand that completely. Stay away from these. Don't get them. So that should do it, I think. If you guys have any questions, leave a comment, and I will help you out if I can. There are, you know, check out the videos in that Grazer playlist. There are resources there to help you if you have a specific mower-related question. My understanding is that these 2000s series, the 2000 series, 20, or not, I'm sorry, I messed that up, excuse me. The 90 series, the 97 series, a lot of these should be similar. This mower is very similar to that mower, but they are not the same because that has a different clutch, different engine. I think the transmissions, the hydrostats are a little bit different. The general principle, though, is the same. And so the videos that I've put out about this should give you a general idea on how to work on something a little bit different than this. It should give you something to go off of, you know. So that ought to do it. If you end up with one of these, good luck. Let me know if you have any questions about anything down in the comments or whatever. I'll help you out if I can. Check out those other videos I've made for resources, parts lookup, and stuff like that. And good luck. Have fun with your Grazer. Happy cutting, all that. Ought to make your lawn look pretty nice. So we'll catch you guys later. Thank you for watching.